University in Jacksonville, Alabama, not Florida. So let's jump right in, shall we? This is a sword. Okay. These are words. Generally, they're used for very different things. Unless we're talking about backstabbing, in which we can mean, oh, look, I've been impaled. But we can also mean, it's not backstabbing if I just tell our boss how lame you are while you're sitting here, is it? So in that sense, maybe words and swords aren't so different after all. Think of the biggest elementary school lie we were ever told. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We all know that's a lie. And that's where this presentation comes in. Swordplay, wordplay, you can decide how to pronounce it, but this is an examination of the power of language in Shakespeare's King Lear, Macbeth, and the Tempest. Let's dive right in with King Lear. Has anyone here read it before? Okay, good. So you know that we have King Lear. He's getting kind of old. He has 2 bad daughters, Regan and Goneril, and he has 1 good daughter, Cordelia. And if you have a daughter or happen to be a daughter, you know that girls can turn on the charm to get what they want from their dads. Maybe it's some money or an extended curfew, or if you're Regan and Goneril, a kingdom. And they do what all daughters do. They flatter King Lear. If Goneril and Regan had charged the stage equipped with swords and axes, the play as a whole would not be successful. To use language as skillfully, albeit deviously, as the sisters do, requires a certain amount of mental strength. The use of flattery highlights one of the most destructive powers of language. It's able to appear genuine when it's actually a shameless lie. And that, of course, brings us to King Lear's biggest language manipulator, Edmund. He's the illegitimate son of Gloucester. Here he is, poor guy. And he's the brother of Edgar, who's a legitimate son. And naturally, this means that Edmund doesn't get what Edgar gets. Edmund is the youngest, and he's not legitimate. So in Gloucester's will, he'd get literally nothing. And he doesn't like that, so like any good villain, he finds a way around it. Edmund pledges himself to the laws of nature, saying, "Thou nature art my goddess, to thy law my services are bound." Like the medieval weapon, man-made law is concrete and immovable. But nature, like language, is fluid and ever-growing. Edmund fabricates a letter in his brother Edgar's handwriting to manipulate their father. And it's arguably this letter that propels the tragedy into a downward spiral. This false writing, both physically false in that it's not Edgar's handwriting, and metaphorically false in that the words that are written are lies, is tangible proof of language's fluidity and the way it can bend to suit the writer or speaker's needs. In fact, the only time we see Edmund fail in this play is at the end when he picks up a sword to fight Edgar. If he had stuck to his words, we probably would have seen a very different ending. And then we have Edgar, who contrarily uses language for good, but he's still lying. If you've read the play, you know there's a scene where Gloucester's been blinded, Edgar is disguised as poor Tom the beggar, and Gloucester wants to commit suicide by jumping off the white cliffs of Dover. So Edgar, poor Tom, is like, "Oh sure, I'll lead you there," and it's like a flat plane. There's nothing there. But he leans over the edge and he's like, "Oh my, the people, they're falling into my city." So Gloucester jumps, and the angels save him. It's all an outright lie. But what's important here is that Edgar is lying to save Gloucester's life, and Edmund was lying to ultimately end his brother's. Here, the intent of the language is as important as the language itself. And this acknowledgement again emphasizes the duality of language. A lie can be used for good, as Edgar uses it, or for evil, as Edmund does. And the fact that Edgar lives and Edmund dies cannot go unnoticed because it's the brother who uses language for good who lives, and the brother who uses language for evil dies. And there's the moral of that story. But language may be most powerful in Macbeth, I'm sorry to say, We have Macbeth. We have his wife, Lady Macbeth. And she convinces Macbeth to kill King Duncan. And that's kind of where the play starts to get dicey. Because immediately after the murder, Macbeth can't bring himself to say the word amen. And so begins the downward spiral language. At the beginning, Shakespeare juxtaposes two deaths, the Thane of Cawdor and Lady Macbeth. The Thane of Cawdor is able to completely articulate his treason into a confession, and he dies at peace with himself. Lady Macbeth, who's this queen, she's supposed to be very regal and noble, dies off stage with a garbled scream, and she hasn't been able to speak for the latter half of the play. So the roles are very much reversed and not what you think. So why is that? The act of speaking is key to the world of Macbeth. In this play, the power of language has an internal psychological hold on the characters and is, in its own way, as equally damaging as any sword. Those who, like Cawdor, are able to express and give a name to their actions are seen as having an element of control over their surroundings, whereas those who cannot bring themselves to speak are ultimately powerless. And you can't talk about Macbeth and naming without talking about the witches. Naming, not naming, speaking, speaking. The witches do this so often. They name their ingredients. They predict Macbeth's rise and fall from power. But what are they? You can read them so many different ways. But I think that, oh wow. Plot twist, we talk about the Tempest at the end. Reading the witches as a physical manifestation of Macbeth's consciousness implies that their prophecy is not merely a plot device, but rather the spark of tragic potential that was already present in Macbeth. Within all human beings are the seeds of desire and greed and the capabilities to hate and harm. But because Macbeth has repressed these feelings for so long without giving a name to them, they've grown into a force that controls him. If this is the case, and the deed without a name that the witches mention does refer to murder, then the murder is Macbeth's, because it's ultimately his base emotions that are his downfall. And now, guess what? We're talking about the Tempest. You can see language in the Tempest, but in a very, very different way. In the previous two plays, it's been about destruction, manipulation, control. Here, we see it in a more lighthearted sense. The Tempest centers around Prospero and his daughter Miranda. They live on a deserted island, save for Caliban, who isn't quite human. The Tempest is a superb example of language being used for creation. With only his spellbooks, Prospero is able to literally craft a life for himself and his daughter on an otherwise desolate island. While there are actual spirits in this play, the magic Prospero uses is a metaphor for art and the imagination. And the confines from which Prospero calls these spirits, or his artistic inspiration, are his books. Without his books, and without the wherewithal to speak the words in his books, Prospero would have no control, which means he would have nothing. But even in the Tempest, language is not all good. Prospero takes Caliban in. You can read it as Caliban is Prospero's slave, maybe his pet, or if you're really into Freudian psychology, maybe Caliban is Prospero's own id personified. But the point is that Prospero teaches Caliban how to speak. And as we can all imagine, it doesn't go well. I think we all talked about white man's burden in our history class, where we feel like we have to go to a new world and make the natives like us because that'll be better for them, right? Wrong. Because Caliban learning to speak leaves him impure. Originally, he's a product of the depraved nature that we saw Edmund wanting to serve. Caliban's raw and wild, potentially dangerous, but ultimately not a threat if left alone. Caliban himself tells Prospero, "You taught me language, and my profit on it is I know how to curse." Caliban is now aware of everything good in the world, but also of everything that's bad, including himself. He's aware that he's not human, even though he can speak like one, and he never will be, and therefore he's aware that he'll never belong. At the end of the play, Prospero leaves Caliban on the island. They leave. They go back to Milan. And and Caliban is left to rule this island, something he had done before but didn't understand, and now he has nothing to lord over. So, in that sense, in these few minutes, we've seen language used for manipulation, for death and destruction, for life-saving, for personal gain, subsequent downfall, control by naming, creation, and mastery. And that isn't even all of it, because I was told I had a time limit. So it gives us, as modern readers, this general knowledge of just how important language was to Shakespeare and to the Renaissance movement as a whole. And so with that, I think it's safe to say that flexibility makes language, in many ways, more powerful than the sword. Tongues and pens can lie because they're controlled by the mind, whereas the sword can be nothing more or less than what it is. Language is the weapon of the intellectual. The medieval weapon is one of brute force, and it cannot evolve like language can. It takes a more delicate touch and a deeper understanding of human psychology to successfully use language. So, thank you guys so much, but I would like to give special thanks to Jacksonville State University, Dr. Carmen DiBiase of the English Department, my English professor for whom I wrote this paper originally, and the Honors Program, Dr. Lori Owens, our director, Mrs. Janet Whitmore, our coordinator, and Ms. Casey Mooney, who's running the house while we're gone, and the Honors Board as a whole. And we would like to thank all of you for being here and seeing this presentation. So thank you for having me.